Welcome to the West Coast WVU podcast, part of the 224 Podcast Network. My name is James Brooks. I'm your host. Thanks for joining me on this week's episode. Um, we're kind of in the doldrums, like I mentioned in my last episode, of college sports at the moment. So, not a ton to really talk about other than getting excited for football season. We're about 74 days from West Virginia's home opener against Robert Morris, which is on August 30th. So we're inching closer, but I mean, 74 days still sounds like a lot to me. So we're getting there. We're getting excited, but I figured we could just kind of talk a little bit of little football news and stuff. And I thought it'd be fun to also, I've mentioned this on this podcast and other things, like, on Twitter and stuff. Like, I'm a big uniform guy. I love sports aesthetics and uniforms and uniform designs and all that kind of stuff. And I thought it might be fun to kind of uh, go through my ranking of West Virginia football uniforms. Um, I think I only have graphics through like up to down back to the 1970s season, so it doesn't have 1960s, which I know where West Virginia is doing a tribute to the 1965 West Virginia football team with those uniforms that we've talked a lot about on this podcast already. So don't have those included, but I figure I could kind of like share my screen and go through some of my favorites. And curious to see what you guys think as well. But in terms of football news, I did see an article on the Ears Sports, I think from Chris Anderson, about scheduling stuff. So West Virginia has added in some more, I think, group of five opponents for the next few years. I think they've added they've added games against Akron. Um, is it VMI, I think, or um, just as future games against like MAC teams, group of five type teams. I think Rhode Island was a team in there. Um, Paying a total of, I think it was like 3.85 million for those games. It's common for Division 1 schools like West Virginia and stuff to pay smaller teams to play against them, kind of almost like preseason type games for college football. So will be interesting to see how those go. It's tough with West Virginia not being in the same conference as Pitt. Those games against Pitt, these rivalry games, they're non-conference games. They're still rivalry games, but they're non-conference games that are being played at the beginning of the season. Usually rivalry games are towards the end of the season. And with that, I think the current, like, basically contract or the schedule that we have with Pitt ends after this season and then renews in a few years, like 2029. Um, and I know, think just talking schedule, obviously, like, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We still have the 2025 season to play, but um, in 2026, 2027, I think we have a series against. Here, let me see if I can share my screen. Um, we have a series against Alabama. So you have um, this is our schedule for this season. We're 74 days from Robert Morris, which means we're, I think, 88 days from Pitt, the backyard brawl in Morgantown. So 2026, we have, yeah, so Alabama, we play in Morgantown, so that'll be a huge game. And I know Neil Brown was talking about trying to get that game off the schedule. I don't know if that's still something that the program is trying to do or if that was just a Neil Brown thing. I would imagine Rich Rod, he wants all the smoke. He's not the kind of guy that's going to shy away from Alabama. I could see that game staying on there. But it begs the question, like, would you, as a West Virginia fan, would you rather play Alabama or would you rather play Pitt? Would you rather keep the backyard brawl going? And I know, like, I don't know if that's even a realistic thing because obviously these games get scheduled out years in advance. But would you rather play Alabama and not play Pitt, or would you rather play Pitt and not play Alabama? Or maybe, you look at this 2026, the first three games, the non-conference games, and you have UT Martin and Virginia. Like, maybe you'd rather keep Alabama on, but switch Virginia with Pitt or UT Martin with Pitt. Um, The Virginia game, it's a neutral site game in Charlotte, which is supposed to be super lucrative for I think both programs, but I would imagine that one wouldn't get moved. And at this point, I don't even know if it's even possible to move these games around, but it's a fun thought experiment. Would you rather play Alabama or Pitt? And I think there's a good argument for both. And then looking forward, 2027, you got I'm gonna click go. You have yeah, Alabama in Tuscaloosa, VMI, Ohio. 2028. The only thing scheduled right now is Tennessee. Looks like that's a neutral site in Charlotte. That'll be a huge game. 2029, I think, is when Pitt gets back on the schedule. Yeah. So you get a 4 year gap of not playing Pitt, which is a shame. I would love to see something done to help fix that. Don't know if at this point in the scheduling and how things work with how far out these games get scheduled, if that's even a remote possibility. But I personally, I think I would rather play Pitt than Alabama next season in 2027. Getting to play Alabama is huge. You get a lot of eyes on you. Alabama has a huge fan base. West Virginia has a huge fan base. Hopefully by 2026, 2027, that time frame, Rich Rod has the team well oiled and competing at a high level. I don't know how high the expectations can be for next season with all the new transfers and everything, but hopefully by then we're able to compete with a squad like Alabama. In which case, like again, from a money standpoint, from a TV viewership standpoint, from a promotion standpoint, that's huge. You look at when we played Penn State to start off last season. Yeah, we got smoked, and it's not fun to talk about, but it was that game was hyped. You had and obviously like Pat McAfee helps. I feel like no matter who we were playing, he would be hyping us up for the first game of the season, but especially against a team like Penn State, again, huge fan base and stuff. Like that game was super hyped, and it's unfortunate the way the game went, but you to get all that hype going into the season is nice against a team like Alabama. But when it comes down to it, like college football is about the rivalries. Like I think I would rather still play Pitt, and like you can still the backyard brawl gets hyped up. People that aren't Pitt or West Virginia fans still talk about how elite the backyard brawl is from a rivalry standpoint. It's constantly in the top 10 rankings of the best rivalries in college football, if not higher than that, maybe top five even. And so, if you can make it happen, you make it happen, in my opinion. But from a money standpoint, I could see not wanting to move off of those Alabama games. But it's a fun thought experiment. So if you're listening, in the comments, let me know. What do you think? Would you rather play Alabama? Would you rather play Pitt? Would you rather find a way to do both and get rid of Virginia or something like that? But not sure how realistic any of that is, but fun to think about. So going from there, I kind of want to just jump into actually one other thing I was going to mention was from a roster standpoint. I'm still trying to get my bearings on this upcoming 2025 team and what what the team looks like and stuff. I know there's been almost like what feels like a record level amount of transfers out after Neil Brown left. Big guys like CJ Donaldson, um, Hudson Clement, like big contributors to the team have either transferred out or you have guys that have been like drafted in the NFL, things like that. And so Garrett Green, obviously, he was a senior, he's gone. So it's hard to get a bearing necessarily on like how the team is shaping up this early into the summer. Um, and sorry, I'm so red. I got a sunburn at the beach over the weekend. Um, but the one thing I'll say that at a high level that I've seen with the team that I like from a roster standpoint is how senior heavy the team is. Now you can make an argument that that's tough from a what's the word development standpoint. You bring in a bunch of seniors. A quarter to a third of the team is seniors, and that helps you compete this season well, right? You have men competing against it's just better to have older, more experienced players, which is beneficial. But then you lose those guys the next season. You're starting over, and maybe that's just the nature of college football now. Maybe you just got to bring in more transfers, more senior transfers, with the NIL and stuff. Maybe that's just the nature of college football. It's less about development, more about just who's the best and most experienced players we can bring in every season. Um, and maybe that's what it is. But I do like to see a senior heavy team coming into next season. Um, in Rich Rod's first season, it's hard to expect a ton for a first year head coach. I know obviously he coached West Virginia before, but in his first year of the second stint with West Virginia, kind of hard to expect too much. I think you're hoping for a bowl game, at least 6 wins. If you can get to 7, I think that's a good season. Um, I'm sure there's people that have higher expectations out there. Anything less, like less than 5, I think is not a good season. 5 to 6 is acceptable, but you prefer to get 6 so you can get that bowl game. Um, and yeah, but I think having a senior heavy roster helps you get to that 6 wins. Like I think you can push to 6. Maybe you can get more. It's hard to say at this point until you see the team out on the field, and obviously they the team themselves have a better understanding of that, and then also uh, reporters and stuff that are on the ground like at practice and stuff. Like obviously I'm uh, not that. This is purely a fan podcast, and obviously I'm on the West Coast, so I can't can't be there. But um, uh, like to see the senior heavy roster. Obviously, like guys like Jaheim White. Saw a picture of Jaheim White who looks massive. I saw someone post something that said like it looks like Jaheim White like ate himself and got even huge, even bigger. He just looks like he's made of pure rock. Nico Marchiol, who we've seen flashes of really good play from him the past couple seasons. So excited to see. I know there's a quarterback that transferred in also who's kind of competing for that QB1 spot. So also nice to have like a healthy quarterback competition as well in that sense, to not let anyone get too complacent or anything. Guys like Rodney Gallagher staying around is nice too, right? Like he was a 4-star recruit coming out of college or out of high school, and um, I think like college football is just tough when unless you're like a NFL ready type talent out of high school, which like there are guys like that. It's hard to get a lot of playing time and make a lot of production as a freshman and sophomore, and so I think he's either I guess like he'll be a third year player next season, whether he's a redshirt sophomore or a junior. And I think it's easier to expect more from him next season. Um, Jaheim White, I think we can expect. Hopefully, we can expect more. I think, obviously, like he was kind of like a flash in the pan as a freshman, as a sophomore. Guys, kind of, I think players kind of or teams knew kind of how to game plan against him a little more. Um, and then coming into this season, we'll have a new system with Rich Rod and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how they utilize him in that sense. So um, hopefully we can pick up where I mean, again, we didn't have a great season last year, so it's not like we're going from super high expectations to nothing, right? Like hopefully we can keep up to at least what we were, if not better, and then just build the team from there and build the program from there. But I feel optimistic. I think someone like Rich Rod, his mentality, like the players that play for him have to buy in. He's had success building up programs before and stuff, so we will just have to wait and see. But it's definitely exciting to talk about and stuff. And there's still transfers coming in and stuff, so we'll chat about it on the podcast as things like that happen. If there's any big splashes or anything like that. And so with that, I'm going to transition over to talking my uniform rankings. I'm I think I'll start I was thinking I'll start with my number one and go down from there, but why not go from lowest to highest? So let's share the screen again. Let's see. And hopefully I'm oh, you know what? I was probably blocking everything I shared about the schedule, which I'm still figuring all this out. So, okay. So at the lowest spot, I have these uniforms, which in my mind, think of them as like the Dana Holgerson era uniforms with Will Greer and stuff. Personally, I mean, they're not the worst. I think the pickaxe style lettering is unique and kind of fun. Obviously, the Flying WV logo is elite, which I appreciate. What I do not like about these uniforms, I do not like the black with the navy. Just doesn't need to be there, in my opinion. I think black and navy does not look the best, in my opinion. Um, no stripes on the pants. Would like to have stripes on the pants. Um, and while the pickaxe style font for the numbers is unique and fun, I'm more of a classic guy. Would rather have like the collegiate block style type fonts the for the numerical font. So from there, and now some of you might not agree with me here, and I understand. Like West Virginia was almost at its peak with when wearing these uniforms. I refer to these uniforms as like the parentheses uniforms, just with those stripes on the front of the jerseys looked like parentheses to me, which I've never really been a fan of. Also, never been a huge fan of the slanted like italic type font numbers. Now, obviously, like these uniforms, you think of Tavon Austin and Geno Smith, and it's hard to dislike them because of that, and I understand that. You have the glossy helmet, which is now looking back on, I like these uniforms more because of that, because we've had those matte helmets for so long. So understand why people would like these uniforms, but just from a pure aesthetic standpoint, not a huge fan of the parenthesis stripes on the front. And to be fair, like the throwbacks, they age well, I think. Personally, like if I could find like a white Geno Smith throwback jersey or Tavon Austin, I would buy it and wear it. So like in that sense, like I don't hate it. I don't like hate it like that, but just from a raking standpoint, not a fave, but definitely don't hate it. Going from there, so these uniforms are very similar. I actually always get them confused, but these are from earlier on in the 2000s, when West Virginia first moved to this style from like we'll get to it, but like the more traditional block style fonts and stuff. When they first moved to it, this is what they wore in the early 2000s. And you still have kind of that like parenthetical striping, but it's a little more hidden. It's a little more like on the down the side of the jersey and just comes to the front a little bit. Whereas the other ones, it's like straight up parentheses on the front. And um, you do have the stripes on the leg, which is helpful, but um, I like these a little better because that striping on the front is a little more subtle. So then going from there, you have, see if I zoom. There we go. You have the kind of like peak Neil Brown era uniforms, like 2018, 2019, 2020. They're good. They're not, I mean, I think I prefer the simplicity. I like the numerical font, a little more block style. I appreciate, so personally, I like not having any wording in the chest, like how we have West Virginia here. Like it's fun for like an alternate type uniform, but I prefer football uniforms. Like you just don't need lettering on the chest there. You have the logo on your helmet. Uh, I don't know. You just, in my opinion, and I think with like West Virginia specifically, like West Virginia and Mountaineers, it's so busy that it's not my favorite. Teams like Texas, where like it's just shorter, it looks less busy. It works a little better, but I like that these uniforms didn't have that personally. Was not a fan of the gray myself. Um, and but I mean, I thought they were solid. Going from there, we have the 70s era. I thought these were, I think they're just clean. You have the traditional collegiate block style font. You have the white helmets, the white pants, like just clean, nice uniforms. Going from there in the 70s, there was a short stint where they had the gold helmets, which, if you're talking like West Virginia, old gold and blue, I think having the gold helmets makes more sense. That's why I put that ahead of the ones with the white helmets personally. And but it's hit and miss here though. Like if I was making my perfect uniform, like you would throw out the helmet logo here for the Flying WV. I just think that logo is elite. I mean, this is a fun throwback logo with the state outline and stuff, but definitely not better than the Flying WV. Going from there, we have last year the new uniforms from last year. Um, I think again, I talked. I don't like the chest lettering, like I mentioned. Mountaineers, West Virginia, just looks too busy. It is kind of to me that's like a Pop Warner high school type vibe from a uniform standpoint. You look at most of the traditional college football teams. I think Texas has it. Oklahoma sometimes has it. I forget off the top of my head, but like teams like Ohio State, Alabama, USC, those schools, Notre Dame, like you don't have the lettering on the chest, and you just don't need it. But I do like the flying WV on the shoulders, the shoulder striping, the pant striping, um, all of that stuff puts this up and above the Neil Brown era uniforms, in my opinion. And then you probably won't be surprised. But last and not least, for sure. Well, definitely it's not last. It's first. The last, going from the bottom up, is these. I just pulled this from '94, but West Virginia has worn this style uniform from the '80s up until the 2000s, and it's just perfect. Block style. It's simple, traditional. Flying WV. You got your colors. You got the gold pants, the navy jersey, the white jersey with the yellow outline around the numbers. Just perfect in my opinion. So shout out to the what is the website called here? The Mountaineer Uniform Database. I've used it a few times for just checking out uniform stuff with West Virginia, and shout out to them for putting this, having this database here to access and stuff, and fun kind of going through those uniforms and whatnot. But I'm curious what you guys think. Like, what are your all-time favorite West Virginia uniforms? Am I way off base in not liking the parentheses uniforms that I that I refer to them as? Should those be ranked higher? What do you think of those like '70s uniforms with the state outline logo? Um, Definitely would love to hear your thoughts in the comments on YouTube or the comments on Spotify or hit me up on Twitter. But thank you guys so much for listening and go Mountaineers.